Welcome to the Gaslit Nation bonus episode this week. We had a lot of news since we last recorded, so we're going to check in with you on that. Sarah and I were supposed to record yesterday, and we had a time set for 10 a.m. Thursday. I messaged her saying I need to cancel because I just feel very depressed. I went to bed last night after the CNN town hall news and woke up the next morning feeling completely poisoned, like physically sick by what happened on CNN. I did not even watch it. I watched some clips. I watched the audience's reaction. I watched the laughing. I watched Caitlin Collins allowing herself to be objectified for fame and money. The whole spectacle was overtly, deliberately pornographic. I met with a girlfriend later that day for lunch, and she said that she felt as sick physically as she did in November 2016. It was that same level of demoralization and disinformation and just state-sanctioned, or I would say corporate-sanctioned violence. We're going to go into all of that today, but it's very clear what CNN did for profits and why they did it. They orchestrated a Klan rally. Obviously, you're by now, when you're listening to this, you know all the dynamics of this, and you know how dangerous this is. And as somebody who has studied authoritarian states for a very long time now and watched the rise of Putin's mafia state and watched how that's contributed to the destabilization of security around the world and all the hell that's wrought for us here as Americans with helping bring Trump to power and the Pandora's box of crises we're going to be living with for a very long time thanks to Trump and the Kremlin. What happened during the rise of Putin is happening right now in the United States. What Putin did to become a dictator is he put his supporters, his oligarchs, his guys in place across the media landscape, television. The majority of Russians, like the majority of Americans, get their news from television. And so, when Putin was first around, there was a popular SNL style, Saturday Night Live style show that used to make fun of politicians. It was edgy. It was popular. And they'd make fun of Putin. So you can imagine what happened to that show. It's now gone. And in its place is blatant, far-right, xenophobic, misogynistic, violent, fascist pageantry like we saw on CNN the other night. In the United States, we don't have a dictator at the helm orchestrating these moves like we did in Russia when Putin was consolidating power. But Putin wasn't acting alone. He was representing the KGB, the whole KGB dictatorship that for generations ran the Soviet Union like an imperialistic terrorist empire that committed several genocides. People like to compare Putin's aspirations to wanting to be Peter the Great because they forget that Stalin was imperialistic. They forget all the countries that Stalin invaded and took over, even before World War II broke out. So Putin represents this larger fascist movement that came to power, consolidated power in Russia, and controls Russia today and will for the foreseeable future. Even if Putin were to die today, the fascist movement will replace him. And it'll go on and on for generations. We're stuck with it right now, just like we're stuck with our own homegrown fascists. And even John Gunther, one of the star journalists in the interwar period in the 1930s, he witnessed the rise of Hitler in Germany and Austria. He witnessed the Soviet Union with Stalinism in Moscow. He said they're exactly alike. These terrorist systems, these dictatorships are the same. He saw no difference between them. And it's the same with our homegrown fascists. So here in the United States, the fascist movement is helmed by this far-right libertarianism, like John Malone, a proud libertarian who is a major investor in Warner Brothers Discovery, which owns CNN, and he has his minions in place, like David Zaslav, who's running
what was once known as HBO Max and is now just shithole Max.
Right. Yeah. And, he's got David Zaslav, who's running the show, and Chris Litch, who was their eager little beaver to please them with this KKK rally that he produced for them. It was a scene out of Requiem for a Dream, that horrific film of a psychotic fever dream, especially the scene where all those men are around those two women who are fucking each other to try to get money for drugs, and all the men are laughing and cheering. Like, that's what was going on this stage. You had a serial rapist who has dozens of credible accusations against him for sexual assault and rape, including of a child, who has talked about wanting to fuck his own daughter. You had him beating up on a pretty young woman on stage for a jeering crowd. That's straight out of Requiem for a Dream, that disturbing film. If you've ever seen people watch the film Requiem for a Dream, if you turn your back on the screen and watch the faces watching it, they twist, and it's that disturbing. And that's what we were given by CNN. And it was all deliberate. Like, let's get this alpha male gorilla to beat up on this young hot chick, and in return, we'll pay her off with this primetime show and treat her like a star. Oh, you did great, honey. Like that's what they were doing to Caitlin Collins. And she accepted this because she came from Fox News, where that was a deliberate business model under Roger Ailes, again, a serial rapist, a serial sexual harasser, along with other stars there, like Bill O'Reilly and then Tucker Carlson, who were so atrocious in the hostile environment they created, including especially for women, that they even became too toxic for Toxic Fox, right? It's a business model. Legs, we got to see your legs on camera. We got to see your skinny little waist, your big busty chest. You got to dumb yourself down. You got to be a sex doll for us and delivering our fascist talking points. And that's how we're going to win. That's how we're going to infiltrate minds. That's how we're going to become the number one cable juggernaut. That's how people are, and if people want to compete with us, they have to become us. And so those who aren't necessarily fascists themselves, but they are white people who benefit from the violent system of white supremacy, like Chris Litch, they're happy to do this because for them, it's a cash grab. It's, what is called hypercapitalism, where profits come first, shareholders come first, at the expense of democracy itself, at the expense of human rights, and it puts a target on the heads of the most vulnerable people, like women and LGBTQ people and young people, who have to inherit this fucked up toxic mess that these fascists are deliberately creating. But who cares as long as the shareholders are doing well and everyone's raking in money? And that's what we saw. We saw just a violent, pornographic spectacle. And it plays very, very well to the violent mob of the Trumpist movement that is 30% of the vote needed to become president of the United States, because all you need to do is win that slave monument known as Electoral College, that devil's bargain that founded our country. And we've been paying for it, and the world has been paying for it ever since. And a couple of things I want to point out is Trump could not speak ill of Putin, right? He couldn't say who he wanted to win the war. He gave that very deliberately vague non-answer of he wants the killing to stop. Yeah, who doesn't want the killing to stop? If Ukraine stops fighting, Ukraine is gone, and Ukraine becomes a dictatorship, and Putin keeps going, Poland, Baltics, and so on. He's empowered. And you have the international rule of law just dead. And it's all about the jungle rules, and the bigger bully wins. And the world is completely destabilized. So Trump could not give an answer about who he wants to win the war in Ukraine. And the same with abortion. He was asked whether he would pass a federal abortion ban, and he couldn't even answer that because he doesn't want to alienate another key supporting group, which is the evangelicals. And I point this out because what Trump told us at the CNN Klan rally is that he needs Russia's support to win. He needs the evangelicals' support to win. And these are two groups of people that are ideologically aligned because they are all about protecting white male patriarchy. That audience was packed full of howling, whistling, jeering white men for a reason. And Caitlin Collins, pretty young girl, was chosen for the Snuff video to be beaten up on in front of all these men for a reason. Like, this is what they want. They want to be able to dominate others. They want to be able to unleash their grievances. They want to be able to dehumanize, objectify. They want to remain the top dog. They're threatened by equality. They're threatened by human rights. They're threatened by younger generations coming in who are more open-minded and progressive. They hate young people. They want to try to find a way to make it easier for young people to get guns so that the bullies among them can shoot up their workplaces, shoot up schools, but they want to make it harder for young people to vote. So they're closing down all these polling stations, and especially on college campuses and so on. They're banning books for those young people and so on. And so what they want to keep in power is white male patriarchy. And the forces are aligned here in the United States, along with the same forces over in Russia. So if you're wondering, if you're someone who is very frustrated with our support for the war in Ukraine, if you're somebody that is buying into the Kremlin disinformation, the Fox News disinformation, the right-wing Trump disinformation, that we're sending billions for Zelensky to line his pockets or so on, because there are people who have Ukraine fatigue and who are hurting here at home and feel threatened here at home and feel like they need to be getting more support. I assure you, all the support we're giving to Ukraine in order to stop Russia in Ukraine is weakening Russia. Russia is the gasoline on our homegrown fascists. We have our homegrown fascists. They've been here since the beginning. They founded this country through genocide. And Russia is like steroids. When Russia comes in and gives them support with Russian oligarch, dirty, dark money, bots, the millions of bots and so on, and all of that disinformation support. Because remember, Prigozhin, who runs Wagner, the Russian mercenary group that has its army committing atrocities in Ukraine, Syria, and across Africa, what is part of his toolbox of dark arts? Bot farms. And he proudly has admitted that he helped bring Trump to power in 2016, doing it all through the dark arts of his bot farm factories, his operations. So if you want to protect democracy here at home, if you want to remove an important ally, an important quote unquote voting bloc, if you will, for Trump's cult, you need to ensure that Ukraine gets everything it needs to defeat and weaken Russia over in Ukraine, because that is going to remove an important support node for Trump and his cult to come to power. Trump told us that at the CNN Klan rally. He refused to say who he wanted to win this war, just like he refused to say where he stood on a national abortion ban, because he needs the Russians in order to become president. He needs the evangelicals in order to become president. He's not going to betray them on such a big stage as CNN, and he's going to continue with those vague answers because he knows which side his bread is buttered. Like, he knows who is going to be paying his bills and getting him into power at the end of the day. It's the Russians and it's the evangelicals. And if he can align those forces again, like he did in 2016, he's good to sneak in and get just enough votes that he needs. Another close sneaker race thanks to the Electoral College.
The right wing is incredibly well funded. And if you join them, they'll take care of you. That's why people go out and do, what they'll call vigilante killings. It's really just, pure murder. They know the right wing will take care of them. That's why people emulate, the Tucker Carlson style of punditry, or Ben Shapiro, because they know the right wing will fund them and take care of them. Whereas on the Democratic side, they'll
go to war against you.
Yeah. They literally defund you. Like Neera Tanden, who was just hired to replace Susan Rice, was the person who defunded Think Progress, which was a very good left-leaning publication that, especially in its final years, was good at studying global kleptocracy. It was good at following the money and tracking all of these dirty donors. And when she was the head of the NGO that managed Think Progress, she pulled the plug on it. And we don't just need Think Progress back. We need like 100 Think Progresses or different types of, we need reporting, we need commentary. We need to know what's just going on in America, because so many local news outlets have been defunded. So you would think there would be a wonderful opportunity there for people not to tell people what to say, obviously, but to just pump money into the local news infrastructure so folks could air their grievances and have like a place to, state what's going on in their part of the country and get rid of these stereotypes. Like, that's the opening for people to unite and organize and come together. And the Democratic Party, the leadership of it at least, is adamantly against this in their own way. They seem to be as much for this civil war as, Trump and his cronies. That's why they're constantly telling people in states like mine, like Missouri, who are all out voting against them, or women who are out, organizing for abortion rights and literally risking their lives to do this, that we deserve to die, that we're asking for it. That we constantly hear this refrain, not from the Republicans, but from the Democrats. And so, we need some sort of place where folks can just, like you said, like a town square where people can talk to each other and, share the realities of their life. And we sort of had that in a really unfortunate way in Twitter. I mean, it was bad, but it was still incredibly valuable. And it is an enormous loss that we don't have that ability now. It was never ideal. It was always full of, vitriolic trolls and propagandists, and you were limited to 240 characters and so on and so forth. But at least it was somewhere where folks could just overhear a conversation without even saying that they're in it, and learn something new from somebody living a life different than their own. Like, that's an important thing. And it happens less and less frequently in America. And so all these, these horrible regional and racial and other sorts of stereotypes get exploited by political operatives, especially by the Trump camp. So, yeah, there are solutions out there. It's just really unfortunate that they rely on money at a time of inflation and extreme expense. And also when people are feeling, demoralized and burnt out by things like this CNN reality TV KKK rally. So I'm not going to be like, don't let it demoralize you, because it's kind of like a natural consequence of seeing, like, I didn't even watch it because I knew how I would feel. It's a natural consequence to feel that way. But I would say just, feel that feeling and then just keep talking back. I mean, that's like, keep digging for truth, keep stating your mind. Don't try to, fit in or please anybody or placate anybody or any of that bullshit. Like, you have the right, to your thoughts, to your soul, and to have your expectations met and to have your rights respected. And I think they want to grind people down to a point that they become supplicants, begging for the most basic of rights that maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we would have taken for granted. Opportunities or just, pieces like freedom of expression that we may have taken for granted. They're gradually grinding that down in the way that typically happens when a democracy turns into an autocracy. And so it requires self-awareness. So sometimes I see people like beating themselves up about all this on Twitter. And I just want to say, don't do that. Because if you're aware that this is going on, then you're way ahead of a lot of folks. And if you're willing to even say publicly what is going on, then you're being brave, then you're being outspoken, and you're doing your part. And, there are many people who feel the same way as you, who don't necessarily express it, but you're definitely not in the minority there in terms of feeling this, in terms of knowing something's wrong. The problem is getting all of us, this large group of people who feel the same deep anger and frustration and willingness to change this horrific situation, of getting us together and figuring out new tactics and new strategies, because the old ones are just simply not going to work at this time. There was a time where they could have worked. We kept pointing out those times. And the people who had power chose not to use it. They chose not to act and to leave us all in the lurch. But we're in the lurch together. So it's very important, for folks to have each other's backs and do find this town hall, this venues of free speech to strategize and share their grievances and be open with each other.